Jens Eskelund is the Managing Director of Maersk China and Vice President of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. I asked him about the importance of Macron and von der Leyen's visit.
I think it's hard to exaggerate the importance of this visit. It's the first time in many, many years since the onset of COVID that we have had European leaders being able to go to China and meet Chinese leaders face to face. I think there's importance in them also going together. It's a joint visit. It demonstrates European unity. And then, of course, looking at the state of the world today, dialogue is perhaps more important than ever. It is important that we find ways to keep the dialogue going and dialing down the tensions that we see.
And we've seen already a long list of agreements being made between France and China, including a deal with Airbus, energy partnerships amongst them. What do you make of the shape and the scale of them?
But I think it's wonderful, and it demonstrates again that China is open, and there is a continued interest amongst European companies to invest and trade with China. Truth be told, we think in the European Chamber of Commerce in China that European companies are under-invested in China. Europe invested more in Texas last year than they invested in China, and that cannot be right. And I think having these meetings, delegations coming, having the dialogues, having the meetings is something that perhaps can help bringing a little bit proportion back into the game. So this is good.
And what about trade itself? How important is trade with China for Europe and vice versa?
It depends a little bit how you look at it. If you look at it in terms of trade volume, China is actually exporting 3 times more in value terms to Europe than Europe is exporting to China. So when you look at it purely sort of from an export perspective, Europe is certainly a lot more important to China than the other way around. It, of course, also means that for Europe, China has an enormously important place in value chains, in European supply chains. But I think over time it would be healthy if there is a little bit more balance in trade between the two countries. We have seen the trade gap between Europe and China widening quite significantly during COVID in China's favor. So a little bit more balance, I think, would be helpful also to and to avoid that this at some point in time could also become a political problem.
And how do you think Washington will view this visit by President Macron and Ursula von der Leyen? We've seen the China-US relationship have become more tense recently. Do you think this will change things?
I think last year, and it's interesting to observe that both United States and Europe had the largest import from China on record, irrespective of the tensions. I think also we need to keep in mind that when you look at the goods that are in scope of some of these restrictions, it's a very, very minor percentage of the total trade between both China and the US and China and Europe. So I think it's important also to not blow it out of proportion, these issues here. I think also Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, said it very clearly that this is not about decoupling. It's about looking at areas where Europe is very, very exposed because of high vulnerability due to dependencies. And I think it's prudent to take a look at these to make sure that if we have things like COVID and other black swan events, that Europe will find ways to not get into having issues because of supply chain constraints.